The sun had barely risen over ardent prime when the alarms began screaming through the colony. Commander Elias Kane stood on the observation deck of the human military outpost, his eyes scanning the horizon. Red streaks of Zelari warships tore through the sky, cutting through the morning haze with deadly precision. He had seen battles before, but this was different. The Zelari were relentless, their ships faster and more numerous than anything the humans had ever faced. The colony's walls shook as the first wave of plasma strikes hit. Buildings crumbled and alarms blared in every district. Panic rippled through the streets below. Civilians ran blindly, clutching their children, their faces masks of fear and confusion. Elias tightened his jaw. There was no time to hesitate. Orders needed to be given, and he had to make sure the people survived. "Lieutenant Arlen," he shouted, "get the defense turrets online, focus on their entry points. I don't care what it takes." Turrets powered up, and automated drones rose from the ground, their weapons locking onto the incoming enemy fighters. Elias turned his gaze to the palace at the center of the colony, a towering structure of crystal and steel. That was where Queen Lyra had been trapped. She was the last of her kind, a species whose alliance with humanity had brought hope to countless colonies. Losing her would mean not only the death of a life, but the collapse of a fragile alliance that had taken centuries to build. The palace trembled as plasma fire scorched its walls. Smoke billowed from shattered windows. People outside shouted and ran, but Elias could only focus on one thing. He couldn't let the queen die. A lieutenant ran up beside him, her uniform singed in places. "Commander Kane, we need to evacuate the civilians first. You can't risk." Outside, the chaos of battle surrounded him. Fire burned through the streets, alien ships strafed the colony with unrelenting precision, and the cries of terrified people filled the air. Yet Elias moved forward, every step driven by duty and something more personal, a sense of honor that refused to bend in the face of fear. As he approached the palace gates, a massive explosion shook the ground. He stumbled but regained his balance, scanning for the safest path inside. The main doors were molten from the fire, warped beyond use. He ducked through a side corridor, the walls glowing with heat. Smoke filled his lungs and sweat ran down his face, but he pushed on. Inside the palace, the air was thick with dust and ash. The once grand halls were now ruins. Chandeliers had crashed to the floor and statues lay shattered. Elias called out, "Your Majesty, Queen Lyra, can you hear me?" Lyra looked small and fragile against the destruction, but her eyes held a strength that cut through the smoke. She tried to stand, but her ankle was caught beneath a fallen beam. "Don't worry, Your Majesty, I've got you," Elias said, kneeling beside her. He lifted her carefully into his arms. Her weight was surprisingly light, almost delicate, but the flames around them made every step dangerous. As he carried her through the corridors, pieces of the palace ceiling collapsed in a shower of sparks and stone. The heat was intense, singeing his hair and burning his skin, but Elias focused on a single thought: get her out alive. Outside, the streets were chaos incarnate. Zelari patrols had landed, their armor glinting in the firelight. Elias moved quickly, ducking behind rubble and staying low. He fired his sidearm when necessary, each shot precise and controlled, buying them moments to advance. Civilians ran past, some screaming, some frozen in terror, but Elias kept moving, never letting his focus break. At one point, a plasma blast tore through a wall near him, throwing him off balance. Lyra cried out, but he caught her, steadying both of them. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said firmly, though his voice was strained from the heat and smoke. The outer walls of the colony were in sight, but Zelari forces were closing in. Elias' mind raced. There was no way to reach the evacuation point without fighting through them. He took a deep breath, then ran forward, weaving through fire and debris, ducking under alien gunfire, and using every ounce of human ingenuity and instinct he possessed. A squad of Zelari soldiers blocked their path. Elias dropped to the ground, rolling behind cover, then sprang up, firing his weapon. Each shot counted. One alien fell, another staggered, but more were coming. He grabbed a fallen pipe, swinging it with precision, striking one of the Zelari before ducking behind cover again. Lyra whispered from his arms, "Elias, you're incredible." Even in the smoke and fear, her eyes shone with determination, trust, and something he hadn't expected, hope. "Stay with me, Your Majesty. We're almost there," he said, his voice tight but calm. Finally, they reached a collapsed plaza. The evacuation shuttles were taking off, but the ramp was blocked by alien forces. Elias set Lyra down, pulling a small device from his belt. He activated a series of drones that whirred into the sky, emitting blinding flashes and small explosives. The Zelari soldiers stumbled, giving him the moment he needed to push Lyra onto the ramp. "Go, I'll cover you," he shouted. "No, Elias, I'm not leaving without you," she cried, but he forced her up the ramp, keeping a hand on her shoulder. The shuttle's doors began closing. He leapt forward, just making it inside, and collapsed beside her. Around them, the engines roared as they lifted off. The colony below was still burning, a patchwork of fire and ruin, but Elias felt a flicker of relief. They were alive. Lyra turned to him, her expression a mixture of awe and gratitude. You carried me through the flames," she said softly. "I cannot thank you enough." "You are remarkable, Elias Kane," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I hope you know how much your courage means." But inside the shuttle, Elias and Lyra sat together, the heat of battle still lingering in their bones, the smoke of the destroyed colony still in their lungs, yet the spark of hope growing between them. Humanity had survived another impossible test, and the bond between human and alien had been forged in fire, trust, and courage. As the shuttle headed toward the hidden asteroid base where the survivors were regrouping, Elias looked at Lyra once more. She was still fragile, still recovering, but she was alive. And in that moment, he realized that courage alone had carried her, not just through fire and battle, but into a future where humans could truly make a difference in the galaxy. He knew the journey ahead would be even harder. The Zelari would not stop, and the weight of leadership would press heavily on him. But for now, they had survived, and that survival was proof of humanity's strength, ingenuity, and heart. And maybe, just maybe, it was proof that even in the darkest flames, hope and courage could rise. Lyra's hand brushed against his as they both looked out the viewport. "Thank you," she said again, softly, "for everything. And we'll win." Elias Kane leaned back in his seat, his arms crossed, though fatigue weighed heavily on his muscles. Beside him, Queen Lyra rested, wrapped in a soft blanket provided by the shuttle crew. Her eyes, though still tired, were brighter now, a spark of life returning after the horrors of the siege. Around them, other survivors murmured quietly, some tending to minor burns, others comforting children who shivered despite the warmth of the cabin. Elias watched them, his mind shifting from the immediate relief of survival to the harsh reality ahead. The Zelari had not given up. They would not. Ardent Prime was lost, and the humans and their allies had only narrowly escaped. As the shuttle approached the asteroid base, a massive structure carved into the rock became visible. The base had been prepared long before, a safe haven for humans and allies in case of emergencies. Its walls were reinforced, shields active, and drones patrolling the perimeter. Despite the destruction they had fled, this place offered hope, a chance to regroup and plan their next move. The shuttle landed in a large hangar, and the ramp descended with a hiss. Soldiers and medical personnel rushed forward to help the passengers disembark. Elias lifted Lyra carefully from her seat, her trust in him absolute, and handed her to a group of medics. She gave him a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of gratitude and relief. Inside the base, the atmosphere was tense but organized. Scientists and engineers moved swiftly, examining salvaged data from Ardent Prime, while military strategists gathered around holographic displays showing the Zelari fleet's movements. Every person seemed to know their role, their faces a mix of exhaustion and determination. Elias moved through the corridors, checking on his men and women. "Report," he demanded from a nearby lieutenant. "We've secured the base, Commander," the officer replied. "Shields are at full capacity, drones patrol the perimeter, civilians are being moved to the inner quarters, medical teams are handling the injured. We're ready for the next stage." "The Zelari won't rest, and neither can we." "You did well, Your Majesty," he said softly. "I've seen a lot of battles, but you were remarkable. Even trapped, you didn't give up." "It's my duty. Humans survive by helping each other, by refusing to let fear control them. I could not stand by while you were in danger." "That is what makes you extraordinary." Scientists analyzed data recovered from Ardent Prime, trying to understand the Zelari's strategies and weaknesses. Even the civilians pitched in, bringing supplies, distributing food, and helping the injured. The human spirit of determination and resilience was evident in every corner of the base. In a strategic planning room, Elias joined other officers and Lyra's advisors. Holographic images of the Zelari fleet rotated in midair, showing the extent of the threat. The aliens were not only numerous but cunning, striking with precision and predicting human movements. Lyra's voice broke the silence. "Commander Kane, I have knowledge that may help. My species has studied the Zelari for centuries." There are weaknesses in their technology and methods to disrupt their communications. If we combine that knowledge with human ingenuity, we may stand a chance to defend ourselves and save other colonies. We improvise, we adjust, and we never quit. Ilias asked questions, suggested modifications, and together they created a plan that combined alien knowledge with human strategy. Meanwhile, in the mess halls and corridors, human soldiers and alien allies bonded. Despite differences in appearance and culture, a sense of unity grew. They shared meals, stories, and laughter, and in the midst of rebuilding and planning, a sense of camaraderie blossomed. Humans, it seemed, had an innate ability to adapt and connect, even in the most unlikely circumstances. As night fell over the asteroid base, a quiet moment settled. Ilias walked along the outer deck, looking out into the vast darkness of space. Stars sparkled like distant fires, indifferent to the struggles below. Beside him, Lyra stepped quietly. "Beautiful," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the distant light. "Even after all that has happened, the universe seems endless and full of possibilities. How we use our strength, our courage, and our ingenuity to protect what matters. Humans never stop fighting for that. The Zelari may be stronger in numbers, but humans have something they do not: adaptability, courage, and the refusal to surrender. That is our weapon." "We have no time to waste," Ilias said. "Prepare the defenses, we'll use what we've learned, and we'll show them what humans can do." Each adjustment, each innovation, was a testament to the ingenuity and perseverance that defined humanity. As the Zelari fleet drew closer, the base prepared for the inevitable attack. Yet amidst the tension, a sense of hope lingered. Humans were not just survivors, they were leaders, innovators, and protectors. Even in the shadow of superior numbers and firepower, they had the courage to face the impossible. Ilias stood on the observation deck once more, Lyra beside him. "Whatever happens next, we face it together," he said firmly. Lyra nodded. "I trust you, Ilias, and I trust humanity. We will survive, and we will triumph." Ilias clenched his fists, a mixture of anticipation and resolve in his heart. Humanity had been tested, and they had survived. The coming battle would test them again, but he knew this: humans never give up. They endure, they adapt, and they rise. And with Queen Lyra at his side, they would face the flames of war together and emerge stronger for it. The asteroid base shuddered as the first wave of Zelari ships entered the system. Red beams cut across the darkness of space, warning lights flashing throughout the base. Ilias Kane stood at the observation deck, his jaw tight, eyes scanning the enemy formations. The Zelari fleet was massive, their ships fast and precise, their tactics calculated to overwhelm any defense. But Ilias did not falter. Humanity had survived impossible odds before, and this would be no different. "Commander Kane," Lieutenant Arlen called, her voice tense but controlled, "the first wave is closing in. Shields at 80%, but we may not hold if they focus on the central shield generators. If we can disrupt their formation, the rest will falter. If we disrupt them, even temporarily, the fleet will lose coordination. Their fire will be scattered, giving your forces an advantage. Set the sequence. I'll coordinate the drones and turrets." Ilias moved through the control room, issuing commands. "Arlen, redirect power to the forward turrets. Keep drones on intercept. Medics, be ready for casualties, but focus on evacuation first. Every life counts." Ships collided in mid-space, their coordination thrown into chaos. Plasma fire scattered, some beams striking each other, others overshooting the base entirely. Ilias allowed himself a brief smile. Humanity had found a way. The combination of human adaptability and alien knowledge was already turning the tide, but the battle was far from over. Another wave approached, faster and more aggressive. This time, the Zelari were determined to breach the defenses. Ilias grabbed his sidearm, moving to a forward control station where automated turrets were stationed. "Keep calm," he muttered to himself. "Humans do not panic, humans adapt." The drones moved like living shadows, weaving through enemy fire, striking vulnerable points on the Zelari ships. Every drone destroyed, every turret hit, every quick decision made a difference. Lyra watched him work, admiration in her eyes. "You think fast, Ilias. Humans are resilient in ways that even we sometimes cannot match." "Resilience is all we have, and courage. The Zelari may be strong, but humans endure. We never stop, even when the odds are impossible." Every person played a role. Every human action counted. Amidst the chaos, Elias noticed a group of injured soldiers trapped near the hangar bay. Plasma fire surrounded them, leaving no easy escape. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward them, dodging energy blasts and leaping over debris. He reached the soldiers, handing weapons to those who could still fight, pulling the severely injured into his arms and leading them back to safety. Lyra followed closely, her own courage unwavering. "Commander Kane, you can't do this alone," she shouted. "I don't intend to," he replied, glancing at her. "We do this together." Humanity survives together. Ships collided, some destroyed by misfired plasma, others disabled by drone attacks. Elias allowed himself a moment to breathe. They had survived this wave, but he knew the Zelari would return, stronger and more cunning. "Prepare for the next attack," he said firmly. "We've learned, we'll adapt again, that is what humans do." Not just in humans, but in all of us. We can win this if we continue to fight as one. "All drones, all turrets, target that ship." The strike ship faltered, veered, and finally exploded in a cascade of fire. The team cheered briefly, but Elias did not allow himself to relax. "This is only one ship. The fight is not over," he reminded everyone. As the dust settled, Elias walked through the command center, checking on the team. Soldiers and engineers were exhausted, yet their faces reflected determination. Humans adapted, learned, and endured. The bond between them, strengthened by the shared struggle, was unbreakable. Lyra approached him again, her expression serious. "The Zelari are clever, Elias. They will test us in ways we have not anticipated. But we now have knowledge, and humans have the ability to adapt faster than they expect. This is our strength." And that strength is not just technology or weapons. It's courage, ingenuity, and heart. Humans are defined by what we do when fear is strongest. That is what makes us powerful. Soldiers, scientists, and civilians alike prepared for the next wave, every action deliberate, every movement purposeful. Elias returned to the observation deck, looking out at the approaching Zelari fleet. He thought of Ardent Prime, burning yet remembered, and of the civilians and soldiers who had survived. Humanity had proven its strength, and with Queen Lyra's guidance they would turn survival into victory. He felt Lyra's presence beside him once more. "Elias, why do humans never give up?" she asked softly. He considered this for a moment. "Because we cannot," he said. "Giving up is not an option. Survival is only part of it. We fight, we adapt, we endure, and through that endurance we rise." Always. Humanity never backs down. Humans moved with ingenuity, improvising solutions in the heat of battle. Turrets fired in patterns calculated to intercept the enemy, drones dodged blasts and struck vulnerable points, and the shield generators absorbed massive strikes without failing. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope remained. Humans adapted, survived, and thrived in ways the Zelari did not anticipate. Every move, every quick decision, every courageous act strengthened the bonds between them. Together they were unstoppable. Hours passed. The assault continued, relentless and exhausting. Yet at the end of the battle, the asteroid base stood. The Zelari retreated, damaged and disoriented by the unexpected resistance. Elias allowed himself a moment to breathe, though he knew the fight was far from over. He looked at Lyra, standing tall despite the long hours, her eyes reflecting the determination and strength he admired. "We did it," she said quietly, a small smile breaking through. Elias shook his head, a faint smile of his own forming. "We survived this wave, but the war isn't over. Humanity will face every challenge, every danger, and we will rise stronger each time. That is what we do." Inside the base, humans moved with quiet confidence, preparing for whatever the Zelari would bring next. Courage, ingenuity, and heart, these were the weapons that no enemy could destroy. Elias Kane knew this truth, and he knew as long as humans endured there was hope, always hope. The asteroid base was quiet now, though only for a short moment. The Zelari fleet had retreated, but their defeat was temporary. Elias Kane walked through the command center, checking on soldiers and engineers. The energy in the room was a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Every human there had given everything during the last attack, but they knew the fight was far from over. "Commander Kane," Lieutenant Arlen said, approaching him with a data tablet. "Our scouts report the Zelari regrouping near the outer sector. They are repairing their ships and preparing for a counterattack." Her fingers traced paths of enemy patrols and supply routes. "Lyra, can your knowledge guide us to their fleet? We need to strike before they recover fully." "But it will be dangerous." Soldiers checked gear, exchanged last-minute instructions, and shared quiet words of encouragement. The sense of unity was palpable. Despite the exhaustion, every human knew their purpose and the stakes. Lyra joined Elias on the observation deck, her presence steady and calm. "I will guide you through the defenses," she said. "Trust my knowledge of Zelari tactics. Together we can succeed." As they approached the Zelari repair station, scouts reported enemy patrols in unusual formations. Lyra analyzed quickly. "They expect a frontal assault," she said, pointing at the display. "We will approach from the nebula's shadow. Their sensors will struggle in the interference. We strike fast and precise. Let's show them what unity can do." Elias barked commands. "Now strike with everything. Drones focus on communications. Turrets aim for weapon systems. Humans stay sharp and adapt." Explosions rocked the facility, fires erupted across decks, and Zelari crews struggled to respond. Elias watched the battle unfold from the command deck, issuing precise orders. "Flank their main ship from the left. Overload the energy nodes. Focus fire on their engines. Redirect drones for a high-angle strike." Soldiers and engineers followed his instructions without hesitation. Every human, every ally, contributed to a plan that combined strategy, adaptability, and courage. Amid the chaos, Elias spotted a group of Zelari engineers attempting to repair a critical weapons system. Without hesitation, he grabbed a small strike team. They boarded one of the smaller attack ships, dodging fire and maneuvering through debris. They struck swiftly, disabling the weapon before it could be brought online. Lyra followed in another ship, guiding their movements. "Careful, Elias, the hull is unstable." Every successful strike filled the humans with hope, and the sense of teamwork strengthened further. Hours passed, and the nebula belt became a battlefield of fire and smoke. Explosions lit the darkness, laser beams crossed paths, and the hum of engines filled the void. Yet, despite the chaos, humans adapted at every turn. They improvised, they endured, and they continued to fight with unyielding courage. Finally, Elias saw the opportunity for a decisive strike. "Lyra, lead the attack on the central supply hub. Disrupt their logistics completely. Humans, follow my lead. We finish this today." The humans followed, weaving through plasma beams and collisions, and reached the supply hub. Drones struck energy nodes, turrets fired with deadly accuracy, and human pilots executed maneuvers that Zelari tactics could not predict. The supply hub erupted in flames. Explosions rocked the area, and the remaining Zelari ships scattered in disarray. Elias allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. Humanity had succeeded. They had struck a decisive blow, crippling the enemy's logistics and proving that courage, ingenuity, and unity could overcome even superior forces. Lyra's voice came through the comms, calm but filled with admiration. "Elias, you have led humans to victory again. Your courage, your strategy, your ability to adapt, you are remarkable." Ships were damaged but repairable, and the humans had gained not only a strategic advantage but a boost to morale. The asteroid base would remain secure, and other colonies would have hoped that the Zelari could be resisted. As the fleet returned to the base, Elias and Lyra shared a quiet moment. "You were brilliant," she said softly. "But more than that, you inspire. Humans inspire. Even when the odds are impossible, you find a way. Together, humans and our allies can change the course of this war." "Humans never give up," he said to those he passed. "We learn, we adapt, we endure, and through our courage and unity we rise always. We are all fortunate to have each other. That is what makes us strong. That is what makes humans unstoppable. Courage, ingenuity, and unity, these are our weapons, and they cannot be defeated." Elias knew that the Zelari would return, stronger and more determined, but he also knew that humanity would be ready. They had faced the impossible, adapted, and survived, and they would continue to do so. In the quiet moments, Elias and Lyra spoke of strategy, of hope, and of the future. Their bond strengthened through shared experience and trust. Together, they would lead humanity and their allies through the challenges to come. The stars outside glimmered, indifferent yet magnificent. Humanity's courage burned brighter than any fire in the universe, and with each act of ingenuity, each moment of endurance, they proved that no force could break their spirit. Elias Kane looked at Lyra, her figure calm and resolute beside him. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together. Humans adapt, humans endure, humans rise, and we will prevail." The humans had proven their strength, but more importantly, they had proven their spirit. Courage, ingenuity, and unity. These were the tools that would lead them through the darkest battles and into a future shaped by their determination. And so, as the stars stretched across the void, humanity prepared for the battles ahead. With courage in their hearts, strategy in their minds, and unity as their strength, they would face the Zelari once more, and they would rise. The silence of space was deceptive. From the asteroid base, Elias Kane watched the Zelari fleet assembling once more. This time they were more prepared, more determined. Their strikes had been delayed but not defeated. The humans and their allies knew that the next battle would decide the fate of countless colonies. There could be no mistakes. Elias moved through the command center, checking on soldiers and engineers. Every human, every alien, every drone operator was at their station ready. Despite exhaustion, there was no fear, only focus, preparation, and the determination that defined humanity. "Commander Kane," Lieutenant Arlen said, urgency in her voice, "the Zelari fleet is larger than we anticipated. They have reinforcements from beyond the system. If they attack together, our defenses alone may not hold. Prepare the strike teams. We take the battle to them. That is how we survive. That is how we win." Plasma beams streaked across the void, engines flaring, ships weaving to avoid destruction. The battle had begun. Elias barked orders. "Drones focus on communications. Turrets target weapon systems. Human pilots flank their main ship from both sides. We strike fast and hard. Strike from above and below. Avoid direct lines of fire. Use speed and surprise." Elias noticed the command ship at the center of the formation. It was massive, heavily armored, and heavily defended. To destroy it would be to disrupt the entire fleet. He knew the risk. "This is it," he said quietly, though his voice carried determination. "We strike the heart. Follow my lead." Plasma fire streaked past them. Explosions rocked the void, but humans were unstoppable. Pilots used speed and unpredictability, dodging attacks, drawing the enemy's fire away from others. Drones followed, disabling shields and disrupting energy flows. Lyra's ship followed, guiding them. "Now, Elias, their shields are weakening." With a coordinated strike, drones hit the shield generators, turrets fired concentrated beams, and the strike team unleashed everything they had. The command ship shuddered, sparks flying, alarms blaring. The Zelari fleet faltered. Without the command ship directing them, coordination broke down. Ships collided, plasma beams missed, and chaos spread through their lines. Humanity's ingenuity and courage had turned the tide. Elias saw an opportunity. "All ships converge, focus fire on the command ship. We finish this." Then the ship broke apart, a massive fireball lighting the darkness of space. The Zelari fleet, leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. Humanity had won not through sheer numbers, but through courage, adaptability, and unity. Elias exhaled, exhaustion and relief washing over him. Lyra joined him on the bridge, her eyes reflecting awe and gratitude. "You did it, Elias," she said softly. "Humanity did it. Against all odds, you led us to victory." The stars stretched endlessly, beautiful and indifferent, yet humanity's courage shone brighter than any fire. Lyra looked at him, her voice gentle. "Elias, through all of this, you have not only saved lives, you have inspired hope. You carried me through the flames, through fear, and now you have led humanity to triumph. I see you, Elias Kane, as more than a hero. I see you as someone I trust, someone I choose. You stood beside me, guided us, and shared your courage. That is what made this victory possible." She smiled faintly, her voice steady and heartfelt. "And I call you my husband, Elias, because in the fire of battle you carried me, and together we have carried humanity to triumph. Together we will face every challenge, protect every life, and ensure humanity rises stronger than ever." The victory was significant, but the human spirit was already looking toward the future, toward the next challenge. Elias and Lyra walked through the base together, observing the efforts of soldiers, engineers, and civilians. Every act of determination, every innovation, every moment of courage had contributed to this success. Humans had survived impossible odds, and they had emerged stronger. "Humanity never stops," Elias said softly. "We endure, we adapt, we rise. That is who we are. That is why we fight. That is why we survive." Humans shared technology with their allies, combining knowledge and ingenuity. Every person contributed, understanding that unity and collaboration were as important as courage and strength. Elias continued to lead, not just with strategy, but with example. He moved among the people, offering encouragement, guidance, and hope. Human ingenuity and determination were on full display, showing that even in the darkest moments, courage and unity could triumph over fear and oppression. Lyra worked alongside him, guiding strategies, sharing knowledge, and fostering trust. The bond between them grew stronger, rooted in shared experiences, mutual respect, and a deep understanding of each other's strengths. Together, they became more than leaders. They became symbols of hope. The stars above were endless, silent witnesses to the triumph below. Yet in the asteroid base, the fire of human courage burned brighter than ever. Ships prepared for exploration, defenses strengthened, and humans and their allies stood ready for whatever challenges the galaxy might bring. Elias Kane looked out into the void, his heart steady and determined. Humanity had survived fire, battle, and despair. They had adapted, endured, and risen stronger than ever. And with Lyra by his side, guiding, supporting, and sharing his purpose, the future looked bright, full of hope and possibility. Lyra placed her hand on his, a gesture of partnership, trust, and love. "Elias," she said softly, "the galaxy may challenge us again, but together we will rise, always." Humanity had faced the impossible, survived, and emerged victorious, not through sheer power alone, but through courage, ingenuity, and the unbreakable human spirit. Elias Kane carried more than victories. He carried hope, trust, and the promise of a future built on unity and determination. Humanity had triumphed, and together they would continue to rise, facing every challenge, every danger, and every horizon with courage in their hearts. And in that triumph, Queen Lyra turned to him, her eyes soft but firm, and whispered, "I am yours, Elias Kane, as your partner, your ally, and your wife. Together we will face all that comes." These were the forces that would guide them through the galaxy, shaping a future only humans could create. And as the asteroid base hummed with life, repairs, and preparation, Elias Kane and Lyra stood together, a symbol of hope, courage, and unbreakable human spirit. They had carried the weight of fire, faced impossible odds, and emerged victorious. Humanity had triumphed, and the galaxy would never forget.